The first arrest connected to the Nolan Wells case has just been made, and it was not made by the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. It was not made by Mississippi state authorities. It was made by the FBI Safe Streets Task Force, who tracked a man from Sacramento, California to a Gmail account, to an IP address, to a street address, and arrested him for threats he sent to Judge Ashley Cole and Warren Hudson's family from behind what he apparently believed was an anonymous username. His name is Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumar. His username was Yaya962, and the messages he sent are worth reading exactly as they were written because they are the reason a federal agent knocked on his door this week. On Facebook, he wrote to Ashley Cole, "There is going to be a bomb sent to your office. I am going to get you when you leave work." Then he kept going. "I got your email, your phone number, your address. What is stopping me?" And then he sent her a direct message that read, "There will be a package coming to your office in the next few days. It is going to blow you away when you see it. LOL. Probably be best to have the boys there when you see it as well. Hard to clean, especially from a boat." Not even the FBI can stop this. He was wrong about that last part. According to the Sun Herald, FBI agents with the Safe Streets Task Force identified Dumar by tracing email IP addresses associated with his account, including the email address moneybagsEOJ1916@gmail.com, along with the date of birth, phone number, and street addresses linked to that account. That digital trail led them directly from a Facebook username to a real person sitting in California. Dumar now faces up to 5 years in federal prison, a fine of up to $250,000, and up to 3 years of supervised release for the federal charge of interstate transmission of a threatening communication under Title 18 United States Code Section 875. The indictment reads, "On or about July 11, 2026, in Jackson County, in the Southern Division of the Southern District of Mississippi, and elsewhere, the defendant Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumar did knowingly and willfully transmit in interstate and foreign commerce a communication containing a threat to injure the person of another, to wit, a direct message on Facebook threatening to kill Ashley Cole." Now here is why this arrest matters far beyond the specific case of one man sending threats from Sacramento. The FBI traced Dumar through his Gmail account and his IP address. Those are the exact same categories of digital evidence that exist for every person who has sent threats connected to this case, for every person who has accessed Nolan's Snapchat account from an unauthorized device, and for every person whose phone location data places them somewhere relevant on the afternoon of July 4th. The Bureau just demonstrated publicly and specifically what their digital forensics capability looks like when applied to someone connected to this case. Every person watching this who has sent threats, deleted content, or accessed devices they should not have accessed is now watching a man get arrested in California through a Gmail address he apparently thought was untraceable. The FBI found him anyway, and the same tools that found him are already being applied to everything else in this investigation. Ashley Cole posted the threats publicly on Facebook 3 days after her initial statement defending her stepson Warren Hudson. She shared the screenshots from Yaya962 to show followers what her family had been receiving. The messages escalated from public comments threatening a bomb at her office to direct messages promising a physical package and referencing a boat in language that implied the sender knew specific details about this case. Cole's initial Facebook post had already generated a judicial ethics petition filed with Mississippi's Commission on Judicial Performance after she identified herself as a judge while defending Warren in an active death investigation. The threats arrived on top of that scrutiny, and now the person behind them is in federal custody, facing charges that carry a potential 5-year sentence. That is not a warning. That is a conviction-level exposure for what the indictment describes as a knowing and willful threat to kill a sitting judge. Now let me bring in Bart Edmiston's attorney Russell Latino because he said something on News Nation this week that contains 2 specific confirmed details buried inside a broader legal defense that deserve to be separated from the spin and examined on their own merits.
An alleged enhanced audio of the CTO call that purports to have a background conversation that is suggested sounds like people explaining the murder of Nolan. The word Bart is in there, and I know real people with real platforms are pointing the finger at your client.
Yeah, so we don't see any legitimacy in a doctored transcript or a doctored audio that comes with a transcript, which is a nice psychological sort of game that people play with garbled audio. So yeah, people are just fabricating things wildly. And the consequence of that is that you've got people who are in legitimate fear for their lives. Our viewpoint is not, we can't stop the entire internet. My client's role was to help drain water off of a boat that reported it being in distress. There were 20 plus people separated between those two boats. All of them saw what he did. All of them saw what did and didn't happen. There were 2 credible witnesses at least that saw Nolan Wells on Horn Island an hour and a half after those 2 boats left.
Latino called the enhanced audio circulating online doctored. He described the transcript attached to it as a psychological game played with garbled audio. He said his client's role was to help drain water off a boat that reported being in distress. Those are his characterizations, and they serve his client's legal interests. But inside that same interview, he confirmed 2 things that are not characterizations. They are specific factual statements that either stand or fall against the verified record. First, there were 20 plus people separated between the 2 boats on July 4th. That is a significantly higher number than most public coverage of this case has established for the people present in that specific stretch of water during the critical window. 20 people across 2 vessels means 20 separate witnesses to whatever happened during the tow call window. 20 separate phones potentially generating location data. 20 separate accounts that investigators with grand jury subpoena power can compel under oath. Second, at least 2 credible witnesses saw Nolan Wells on Horn Island an hour and a half after both boats left. An hour and a half, not the vague around 6 p.m. secondhand account Hudson mentioned in his interview. A specific time frame confirmed by Edmiston's own attorney as coming from at least 2 credible witnesses. If those witnesses can be independently corroborated, and if their account is consistent with the GPS data from both boats, this case enters a phase where the central question of what happened to Nolan shifts entirely away from the window when any member of either boat group was present on that island. Now let me bring in the state autopsy development because it has been buried in every piece of coverage of this week's news, and it is one of the most significant confirmed developments this case has produced since the independent autopsy raised foul play questions. Mississippi state officials have completed the state autopsy conducted on July 78, 2026, 3 days after Nolan's body was recovered. The results will remain private in preparation for the district attorney to present evidence to a grand jury. Ben Crump and the Wells family have not yet seen those results. Let that sit for a moment. The family of Nolan Wells, the people fighting hardest and loudest for answers about what happened to their son, have not been shown the results of the official autopsy completed by the state that is supposed to be investigating his death. That is not a procedural footnote. That is the central tension driving everything this family has done publicly since July 4th. Every press conference, every attorney announcement, every independent expert retained at significant personal and financial cost exists specifically because the official investigation has not shared with this family what it actually found when it examined their son's body. The DA has said that restraint is designed to protect the integrity of the grand jury process. The family has said that restraint feels indistinguishable from silence. Both of those things can be true simultaneously. And the fact that the state autopsy is now complete means the grand jury process has one less outstanding item between where this investigation currently sits and the moment a formal proceeding begins examining whether anyone can be charged in connection with Nolan's death. Now here is what the completion of the state autopsy means when placed alongside Dr. Roger Mitchell's independent findings, because the 2 documents together tell a more complete story than either one does alone. Mitchell's preliminary report found a focal area of red discoloration in the deep soft tissue over the occipital bone, measuring 12 inches by 8 inches with unknown cause. He found no fractures, no lacerations, no widespread blunt force trauma anywhere else on the body. He classified the cause and manner of death as undetermined pending further investigation. And he explicitly stated he cannot rule out injury to the neck as a contributor to or cause of death, specifically because the trachea, the laryngeal cartilage, the thyroid horn, and the hyoid bone were absent when Nolan's body arrived in Washington, D.C. for the independent examination. The state's own examiners had those structures. The state's own examiners examined Nolan's body 3 days after recovery, when decomposition was significantly less advanced than when Mitchell received it on July 10th. Which means the state autopsy conducted by people with access to the neck structures, access to the lungs before dissection, and access to the body in a condition closer to recovery has findings that could either confirm or contradict every open question Mitchell identified in his preliminary report. Ben Crump has formally requested that Mitchell be given access to the state's findings and photographs, and that Mitchell be present when this case is presented to the grand jury. Whether that request is granted will determine whether the grand jury hears one official account of what Nolan's body showed, or two potentially different expert interpretations examined side by side. Now, here is something that Warren Hudson's father did this week that has not received the attention it deserves, given who he is and what it means for how his family is positioning itself in this investigation. Hudson's father, the husband of Judge Ashley Cole, has announced a $50,000 reward for any information that leads to an arrest and conviction of anyone responsible for the death of Nolan Wells. Read that again carefully. The stepfather of Warren Hudson, one of the friends who was on that boat on July 4th, has put up $50,000 of his own money for information leading to accountability in Nolan's death. That is not the action of a family trying to suppress the truth about what happened on Horn Island. That is a family putting significant personal financial resources behind the same outcome Nolan's own parents are fighting for. Whether that reward reflects genuine commitment to finding the truth, or whether it is a strategic move designed to demonstrate cooperation in a case where the family is already under significant public scrutiny, is something only time and the investigation's eventual findings can answer. What it does concretely is add $50,000 to the reward pool that already contains $125,000 from Reverend Al Sharpton, Tyler Perry, and Terrell Owens. The total reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction in this case is now approaching $200,000. That is a number substantial enough to meaningfully change the calculation for anyone sitting on real relevant information about what happened on Horn Island on July 4th. The defamation lawsuit threat from Edmiston's attorney Russ Latino also got a direct public response this week from Ben Crump at the National Urban League Convention in Nashville. A reporter asked Crump directly about the threat to sue the family for defamation. His response was immediate and unambiguous. It is a distraction. We are not distracted by it at all. It is about getting to the truth. That is what we want, and that is what we are focused on. We have not done anything other than ask questions to get to the truth. Crump went further in the press conference setting, saying the accusation does not deserve a response and that it has no dignity associated with someone standing up for children who have died. He told the reporter directly that this is an old story, we fight for justice, and someone suggests all we want is publicity. He closed by saying we will not be distracted. That exchange matters for a specific reason beyond the legal posturing on both sides. It signals that the defamation threat has not changed anything about how Crump's team is approaching this investigation. The audio engineering experts are still reviewing the official recording. The oceanic engineering analysis is still underway. The joint phone inspection with FBI present is still being coordinated. The request for Mitchell to access the state's findings is still formally on the table. None of those investigative threads have been slowed or redirected by the threat of a lawsuit, and Crump's public response confirms that none of them will be. Okay, so let me bring every confirmed thread together and state precisely where this case stands after everything this week produced. Because when you place all of it side by side, what emerges is a case that is moving faster and on more simultaneous fronts than it has at any previous point since Nolan's body was recovered at the northwestern tip of Horn Island. The first arrest connected to this case has been made. The state autopsy is complete. The independent audio engineering analysis of the official CTO recording is underway. The joint phone inspection with FBI present is being coordinated. The oceanic engineering analysis of tidal and current conditions is in progress. A $50,000 reward from Warren Hudson's own father has been added to the existing $125,000 reward pool. And at least 2 credible witnesses have been confirmed by Edmiston's own attorney to have seen Nolan Wells on Horn Island an hour and a half after both boats left. Every one of those developments landed in the same week. That is not a case that is stalling. That is a case that is accelerating on every front simultaneously. Now here is what the Dumar arrest specifically tells us about where the FBI's digital capabilities are focused in this investigation, and why the people most relevant to what actually happened on July 4th should be paying very close attention to that. The FBI traced Joseph Dumar from a Facebook username to a Gmail account, to an IP address, to a physical street address in Sacramento, California. That entire process, from anonymous username to front door arrest, happened because digital activity leaves traces that persist long after the person creating them believes they have disappeared. Moneybags IOJ 1916 at gmail.com was not a sophisticated attempt at anonymity. It was a casual username attached to a real account with a real IP address and a real date of birth linked to it, and it was enough. The FBI found him anyway. Now consider what that capability looks like applied to the actual events of July 4th. Every phone on those boats was generating location data. Every Snapchat account active that day was creating server-side records of login activity, message metadata, and account access timestamps. Every email, every direct message, every piece of digital communication sent in connection with this case exists somewhere in a server that the FBI, with proper legal authorization, can access regardless of whether the person who created it believes it was deleted. The Dumar arrest is not just the resolution of a threats investigation. It is a public demonstration of exactly what digital forensics looks like when the FBI applies it seriously to a case. And it is a message delivered to everyone connected to July 4th who has been hoping that what they did digitally stayed private. The two witness confirmation from Latino deserves one more analytical pass before we close, because it is the detail with the most immediate potential to reshape this entire investigation, and it came from the last place most people expected it: Edmiston's own attorney. A lawyer retained specifically to defend his client against accusations connected to this case confirmed on News Nation that at least two credible witnesses saw Nolan Wells on Horn Island an hour and a half after both boats left. Latino's purpose in confirming this was to establish that his client departed the scene before anything happened to Nolan. But the confirmation itself exists in the public record now, regardless of the legal purpose it was meant to serve. An hour and a half after both boats left means Nolan was alive and on that island until at least 6 p.m. on July 4th. The primary boat departed at 4:31 p.m. Edmiston's boat departed around the same window. If Nolan was seen at 6 p.m. by two credible witnesses, everything that happened to him occurred in a window when neither group was anywhere near him. That fundamentally changes the investigative picture of what Horn Island looked like in those final hours. It points toward interactions, movements, and people that nobody has yet publicly identified or accounted for. And it gives investigators a specific time frame to work backward from when examining every piece of footage, every phone record, and every witness account from the hundreds of people who were on that island that afternoon. The state autopsy results being withheld from the family pending grand jury presentation is the thread that ties everything else together in a way that the individual developments do not fully capture on their own. The state has examined Nolan's body. They have findings. Those findings include answers to the specific questions Mitchell identified as critical in his preliminary report. Was there water in the airway? Was there evidence of injury to the neck structures the state retained? Was there intracranial hemorrhaging? What were the stomach contents? What does the toxicology show? Every one of those questions has a documented answer sitting in a file that the DA is preparing to present to a grand jury. Ben Crump and the Wells family have not seen it. The public has not seen it. And the independent pathologist who found a 12 by 8 inch area of unexplained discoloration at the back of Nolan's head has not been given access to it, despite formally requesting that access. What those state findings show when they are finally revealed either to the family through legal process or to a grand jury through formal presentation will be the single most significant evidentiary moment this case has produced. Because the state autopsy was conducted by people who had everything Mitchell did not have. The neck structures, the lungs before dissection, the body in a condition significantly closer to recovery. Whatever they found answers the questions that Mitchell's preliminary report left open. And whatever they found is what the DA believes is strong enough to present to a grand jury. Christine Wells stood at the National Urban League Convention in Nashville and said something that deserves to close this update because it cuts through every legal development, every arrest, every reward announcement, and every expert consultation, and gets to the human center of what this entire case is actually about. She said it has been 27 days since we have been able to talk to our son, to hug him, to tell him we love him. This has been the most difficult time we have ever had. And then she described who Nolan was in words that deserve to be heard clearly. Nolan was a God-fearing, God-loving child. He loved everyone. He was the person who would just make you feel comfortable, just being in his space. He was never one to exclude. He always wanted everyone to be happy, to feel good, to have purpose. He would lift anyone up. It didn't even matter if he didn't know you. If you took that moment to just tell him a little bit about yourself, what you wanted to do with your life, right then and there, Nolan would be your biggest cheerleader. And then Elmore Wells stood up and said what only a father processing the loss of his child can say. I pretty much was raised up like a lot of you. I didn't have a lot, but I always said I wanted to give my children more than what I had. And I think me and my wife, we did that. We raised Nolan to love everyone, be kind to everyone, because it was just the right thing to do. Those are the words of a man waking up every morning facing what he described as the biggest challenge I have ever had, trying to process the loss of a son he raised to be exactly the kind of person the world needs more of. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. The FBI just arrested a man in California for threatening the family of someone connected to this case. The state autopsy is complete, and its findings are being prepared for a grand jury. Professional audio engineers are reviewing the official CTO recording. 2 credible witnesses placed him alive on Horn Island an hour and a half after both boats left. And a reward pool approaching $200,000 is waiting for the one person who knows something and has not yet found the courage to say it. Do for Nolan what he would have done for you. That is what his mother asked at that convention. And that is the question sitting in front of every person who was on Horn Island on July 4th and who has not yet told the full truth about what they saw. If you have made it this far, do not forget to subscribe so you can stay updated as this case develops. Something is moving. I will talk to you very soon.